Welcome to qiphyedu. Today we'll be looking at Economics Paper 11, October-November 2021. Alright, let's start. Okay, first question, it says, a European airline opens a new route to Dubai. It purchases additional airplanes, rents additional landing slots, hires pilots, and buys back some of its shares to raise the value of the firm on the stock market. And what is an example of the factor of production capital? Now, when we talk about capital, we are mentioning capital goods. So the thing here that is a capital good would be airplanes, because airplanes allows a pilot to send passengers to different destinations. So we can consider it a machine, a moving machine, or a moving vehicle. So that will relate to capital goods, things that can result in production, as we say. So the example of the factor of production capital here in this 1, 2, 3, and 4 things here would be under would be the one that would be under factor of production capital would be airplanes. So answer is A. Question 2, which statement about the behavior of firms in a planned economy is correct? So let's see which one would be the one that is part of the planned economy. A, it says firms are sent signals to produce through the price mechanism. This is under market economy or mixed economy. B, it says firms will operate in competitive markets. This is the same, under market or mixed economy. And C, it says firms will attempt to make profits for the benefits of shareholders, which is also under market or mixed economy. And D, it says firms are more likely to consider private external cost production. This one would be under planned economy. Question 3, the table provides information on entrepreneurship among males in 3 countries in 2013. So you can see in Italy, the percentage of males with access to training on how to start a business is 19.1, compared to percentage of males with access to finance to start a business is 10.3. In Japan, it's 31.3 and 34. In Sweden, it's 61.6 and 49.7. So what can be concluded from the table? Let's look at the 4 options here. A, it says in Sweden, it is easier for male entrepreneurs to get training than finance. It's easier for entrepreneurs to get training than finance. You can see there's 61.6% of males with access to training, and then there's 49.7% of males with access to finance to start a business, so that's correct. B, it says it is always more difficult for male entrepreneurs to get finance and training, which is not correct, because in Japan, the percentage of males with access to finance is 34 compared to training, which is 31.3. So it's not always more difficult. And C, it says Italy provides less money for male entrepreneurs than Japan or Sweden, which is not listed in this table, so it cannot be proven, so it's not correct. And D, it says Sweden has more male entrepreneurs than Italy or Japan, which is also not correct, because even though the percentage of males with access to training is 61.6 and the percentage of males with access to finance is 49%, which is relatively higher than Italy or Japan, that doesn't mean that Sweden has more male entrepreneurs. It's just basically showing you that this percentage of people have access to this particular thing and that particular thing. Doesn't exactly reflect the number or the amount of people that are entrepreneurs. So answer is A. Question 4, the diagram shows the production possibility curves of 2 economies, Northland and Southland. Both economies specialize based on the theory of comparative advantage and trade with one another. And what can be concluded from the diagram? So let's look at the 4 options. A, it says both economies face increasing opportunity cost, which is not correct. They are both facing constant opportunity cost because of straight line. And B, it says point P represents the final equilibrium outcome, which is not correct. And then C, it says point R shows the total possible combined production of food and drink, which is correct. Because you can see that, for example, for country, let's say Northland, they can actually produce Y1 amount of food, but then that will be 0 amount of drink. And then for Southland, they can produce X2 amount of drink, but at the cost of, but then that means that they have to forgo all food. But then combining these two together, you get the total possible combined production of food and drink at R. Alright, and then for D, it says all points on Y1 to X2 are only attainable through trade, which is not correct. You don't exactly have to go through trade just to get just to be able to get a certain amount of goods. This one, they can be obtained not through trade at all. So it doesn't have to be that. So the answer would be C. Question 5, the supply curve for fresh fish shifts from S1 to S2 as shown. And what is a possible reason for this change in the supply of fresh fish? So you can see the supply curve shifts to the left. Let's look at the options here that we have. So A, it says demand for fresh fish increases due to promotion of health benefits, which is not correct. B, it says favorable weather increases quantity, which is not correct. C, it says price of fresh fish falls due to new substitute product becoming popular, which is not correct. And so the answer should be D, regulation limits the number of fish being caught. Because you can see for A, it says demand for fresh fish increases, so there should be something like this. D1, D2, shift to right. But then here, there's no demand curve, it's only supply curve. And then favorable weather increases quantity of fish being caught. This means that it should be shifted to the right instead of left. And then price of fresh fish falls due to new substitute becoming popular, which should be when there's a decrease in demand, but there's no demand curve here, so it has to be D. Okay, so for question 6, when the supply of a good decreases, equilibrium price stays the same. And what is the price elasticity of demand for the good? So the supply of the good decreases, but the equilibrium price stays the same, which means that regardless of how you change the price, it will still be the same price. So that means that the price elasticity of demand would have to be infinite, because let's say, for example, I have a demand supply graph. Let's say this is the elastic demand curve, and then I have the supply curve. So let's say the supply of the good decreases like this. You see that the price remains the same. However, if I were to shift the demand curve, let's say I would change it to something like a little bit elastic or inelastic, you'll see that the price would increase. If it's inelastic, it will look something like this. You see there's a sharp increase. So if the equilibrium price stays the same, that means that the demand curve would have to be infinite, which will be something like this, which is a horizontal line. So answer is D. Question 7, what can be measured by cross elasticity of demand? That would be cross elasticity of demand could be, let's say, determine whether the goods are complements or substitutes. So A, it says a change in real income, which will be under YED, so it's not correct. B, it says a change in demand for a good in response to change in price of complement. That would be correct, because for CED, this would be something like this. Percentage change of QDX over percentage change in PY. So the quantity demanded for good X over the price of Y, the percentage change. So change in demand for good in response to change in price of complement. Yep. See, it says change in price of a good in response to change in demand for substitute. We always look at price first before we look at quantity demanded. It has to be that. It has to be price and then quantity demanded. So C is not correct. And D says a change in price of good when the demand for it changes, which is not correct. So answer is B. Question 8. The table shows the maximum price a consumer would be willing to pay for successive cans of fruit juice. The price of a can of fruit juice is $4, and having bought 3 cans, the consumer decides to buy the 4th. And how does buying the 4th can affect his consumer surplus? So at first, the consumer would be willing to pay $14 for the first can, and then the second can would be $10, and then the third would be $6, and then the 4th would be $4. And the price of a can of fruit juice is now $4, and you can see that it would not affect the consumer surplus. Let's say, for example, let's look at things like this. So this would be your demand supply graph, something like this. So let's say this is the first can, second can, third can. Let's say this is the 4th can because it is at $4. So then you can see that the consumer surplus originally should be at $14. And then the first can is, okay, let's just assume it's, I'm going to have to shift the demand curve to the right a little. Yep, so that will be 14. And then there's a decrease, and then decrease, and then decrease. So the consumer surplus is still the same, because there's no shift in the demand curve, and the demand curve remains the same. So after buying a 4th can, the consumer surplus is still the same. So it's just a movement below. So that means that the consumer surplus is unchanged. All right, so I'll say it's A. Question 9, the diagram shows 4 supply curves and which statement about the price elasticity of the curve is correct. A, it says curve 1 has constant infinite elasticity, which is not correct. This one will be PES equals or less than 1 or equals to 0 basically. So it's not A. Question B, it says curve 2 has elasticity greater than curve 4 over its whole length, which is not correct. It does have elasticity greater than curve 4, but not over the entire length. And then C, curve 3 has increasing elasticity, which is not correct, has constant elasticity. And D, curve 4 has decreasing elasticity as price rises, which is correct. Because PES more than 1, but then after its price rises, the elasticity will then decrease. So it has to be D. Question 10, the diagram shows the demand and the supply curves for good in a free market. And what can definitely be deduced from the diagram? A, it says all the costs and benefits of consumption are reflected in OP1, which is not correct. You cannot show benefits of consumption in a graph, basically. B, it says at OP1, consumer expenditure is greater than the firm's revenue, which is not correct. C, it says at OP1, the price elasticity of supply is equal to 1, which is correct. Because you can see that for PES, it is equal to 1, because if you start from 0, it has to be 1. D, it says the market will not clear the price of OP1, which is not correct. That's the equilibrium price. It has to be C. Question 11, the demand for good increases. Under which circumstances will the quantity supply of the good rise the most? So let's see which one will rise the most. A, it says it is an agricultural good that has an annual growing cycle and requires a cool climate. This means that it's inelastic. B, it says it is an agricultural good that is perishable and very expensive to store. It's inelastic as well. C, says it is a manufactured good that uses unskilled labor and there's unemployment in the economy. That would be elastic. D, it says it is a manufactured good that uses capital intensive production and is currently at full capacity. That means it's inelastic. I'll say C. Question 12, the diagram shows the demand curve and supply curve for a good on which the government imposes a specific tax. And what would be the result of this tax? So let's say the government imposes a specific tax, that would be something like this. So we shift to the left. And then it says most of the incidence of tax will then fall on the producer, which is correct. Because as you can see, the shift in the supply curve will be something like this originally. And then you'll see that the slight increase in price is only very minimal. But then you can see that the consumer surplus is basically a very small area, but the producer surplus is a very large area. So the incidence of tax will then fall mostly on the producer. B, it says there will be a new demand curve parallel to DD, which is not correct. C, it says the price will rise by the full amount of the tax, which is not correct. And D, it says the quantity bought will fall proportionally to the tax rate, which is also not correct, because you don't know the tax rate and also you don't know the amount here is not listed. So it has to be A. Most incidence will fall on the producer because the larger producer surplus. Question 13, the diagram shows how a 10% increase in consumer incomes shifts the demand for good X from D to D1. And which statement about good X is correct? So the price is $10. The quantity is 80 and 100. So a 10% increase in consumers' income shifts the demand for good X from D to D1. So it's a shift to the left. This means that it's an inferior good, so AB is wrong. And C says it is an inferior good with income elastic demand, and D says it is an inferior good with income inelastic demand. So this one, in order to calculate whether or not it's income elastic demand or not, or income inelastic, you have to take the QD, which is 100 minus, it has to be 80 minus 100. So 80 minus 100. And then over 100 divided by 10%. So then you'll get a negative 1 over 5, which is negative 20%. Then divided by 10%, so that will be about negative 2%. Yep. So then that means that so that means that it has to be income elastic demand, because let's try Yeah, this one should be, yeah, this one has been incoming elastic demand because it's 2%. So, and so is C. If it's incoming elastic demand, it should be less than 1. So this one is, this one is 2, so it's more than 1, so it has to be incoming elastic demand. All right. And then for question 14, what is an example of privatization? Privatization is basically turning a nationally owned firm into a private firm. So A, it says a sale on the market of a French state-owned power generation market. That's correct. B, it says a sale of privately owned water company to German firm is basically privately owned to privately owned. C says a takeover of French car manufacturer by French government, that's nationalization. D says the purchase of a Swedish pharmaceutical producer by a larger American pharmaceutical producer. This is private firm to private firm. So it has to be A. Question 15, what did Adam Smith mean by economy when describing his canons of taxation? So economy, it has to be basically economical. That means that the cost of planning tax must be low. So it has to be under A. Question 16, the government decides to remove fees for higher education provided by the public sector and the private sector, and what is the consequence of this policy? So A, it says higher education is less likely to be provided by the private sector, which is correct. B, it says resources in higher education will be allocated through the price mechanism, which is wrong. C, it says the demand for higher education will be perfectly elastic when the price is 0, which is not correct. And D, it says the opportunity cost of higher education to students will be 0, which is not correct as well. Because for some people, for them, working would actually be much better compared to studying. So for them, there will be an opportunity cost, which is rather than going to study, they could work and they could earn maybe like hundreds of dollars within the few hours rather than going to study for a few hours. So there would be an opportunity cost. And then there's no way resources in higher education will be allocated through the price mechanism when the government decides to remove fees, because that means that this is basically merit goods. And then they remove fees for the private sector as well. So so basically they can't make a profit out of this thing. So it has to be A. Point 17, what will be the main effect of imposing an effective maximum price? So it has to be below the equilibrium. A, it says inflation will rise, which is not correct. B, it says the price of foodstuff will rise, which is also not correct. C, it says there will be a decrease in the import of foodstuff, which is not correct. So it has to be D, there will be a shortage of foodstuff. Question 18, an effective minimum price is applied to alcohol in an attempt to reduce consumption. And why would the government not buy up any surplus created? So A, it says buying the surplus will be costly to the government, which is correct. B, it says buying the surplus will decrease the incomes of producer, which is not correct. C, it says buying the surplus will lead to a shortage, which is not correct, because you are just buying up the surplus, not the entire stock. And D, it says buying the surplus will lead to unemployment, which is not correct. Buying the surplus will actually cost more employment. So it has to be buying the surplus being costly to the government. Question 19, the government plans to increase spending on education and training every year, and which diagram shows the likely effect of this increase on the economy's long-run output and price level. So increased spending on education, so that will be under AD, and then providing more education and training, so that will be under AS. So it has to be a shift to the right of the LRS curve and also the AD curve. So A and B is wrong, because there's no increase in AT for B, and then there's no increase in AS for A. And then for C and D, you see that for D, the LRS curve shifts to the left, and the AD curve will shift to the left, so it's not correct, so it has to be C. Question 20, what is this inflation? A, it says a fall in output, which is not correct. B, it says a fall in the price level, which is not correct. C, it says a fall in the rate of the increase of the price level, which is correct. And D, it says a fall in the value of national income, which is not correct. So answer is C. The reason why it's not a fall in output is because this inflation would only be a decrease in the rate of inflation. So there will still be, it's not like the AD curve shifts to the left. And then B, a fall in the price level is under deflation. And then D, a fall in the value of national income is also when the AD curve shifts to the left. So this inflation doesn't actually mean that the AD curve shifts to the left. It doesn't. It basically just means that there's a fall in the general price level. There's a fall in the rate of increase of the general price level. So there's still inflation, but not significant. So there will still be a shift of the AD curve to the right, which will result in an increase in the price level. Question 21, what best describes a country's terms of trade? It's basically the price index of exports divided by the price index of imports. So A, it says a difference between volume, that's under balance of trade. B, it says the average price of its exports divided by the average price of its imports, Yes, that's correct. C says the total value of its exports divided by total value of its imports, which is not correct. D says the volume of its exports divided by the volume of imports, which is not correct, so answer is B. Okay, so for question 22, a developed country has a price in elastic demand for oil, all of which it imports. The oil-producing countries increase the supply of oil, and what is likely to happen to the developed countries' real inflation and its balance of trade? So, because now the supply of oil has increased, that means that the supply curve shifts to right, so there's a decrease in the price. And when there's a decrease in the price, that means that for the developed country, they only have to pay this particular amount of money to purchase this particular good. So that means that their real inflation will decrease because they're paying less, but then they're paying less for that particular one item. And then because of the decrease in price, the demand will also increase, so it will shift to right. So then your balance of trade will improve because of net exports increase when there's an increase in demand. So it has to be A, which is real inflation decreases and balance of trade improves. Question 23, country X and country Y both produce rice and tables, and half of their resources are used to produce rice and the other half to produce tables. The resulting output of each product is given in the table shown, and what can be concluded from the table. So you can see that you can produce 150 quantity of rice, but then we can only produce 100 tables. And then for Y, that will be 100 rice to 50 tables. So like something like this. So we 3 by 2 and 2 by 1. So you can see that I'm going to multiply. So this will be 4, 2. All right. So A, it says country X has a comparative advantage in the production of both goods, which is not correct. B, it says country X has a comparative advantage in the production of rice, which is also not correct. C, it says country Y has a comparative advantage in the production of both goods, which is not correct. And D, it says country Y has a comparative advantage in the production of rice, which is correct because it can produce 4 rice at the cost of 2 tables. So not at the cost of 2 tables, but like they can produce more rice than country X, but at the same time they can produce the same amount of tables. So answer is D. Question 24, an economy experiences a deficit on the current account of its balance of payments, and what could the economy do to finance this deficit? Deficit meaning that there's more outflow of money than inflow. So A, it says adopt a fixed exchange rate, which is not correct. B, it says attract more foreign direct investment, which will allow an inflow of money, which is correct. C, it says decrease income tax rates, which will result in more outflow of money. Lowering the rate of interest will also result in more outflow of money, so answer is B. Question 25, a resident of country X buys shares in a firm in country Y. The shares then pay the resident a dividend. And where are these two flows recorded in country X balance of payments? So, resident of country X buys shares in a firm in country Y. This would be under your financial account. Again, this one is not in the syllabus, but it is in the previous syllabus. So, buying shares will be under financial account. A, B is not correct. And then the shares then pay the resident a dividend. This would be under income, primary income, so it has to be C. Question 26, what is the most likely cause of cost-push inflation in economy? Cost-push inflation would be when the aggregate supply curve shifts to the left. So A, it says an increase in the exchange rate, which is not correct. B, it says an increase in money supply, which is not correct. Increase in money supply will result in AD curve to shift to right. And C, it says an increase in price of imports, which is correct. Let's say the raw materials are from other countries, then they will increase the price of imports. D says an increase in the real income tax, which is not correct as well, because an increase in the real income tax would mean that your AD curve shifts to left, so it has to be C. Question 27, which changes are most likely to reduce the accuracy of the CPI as a measurement of inflation? A says a larger sample is used to increase accuracy. B says technology makes it easier for retailers to submit accurate money price data. This would be increased accuracy. C, households change their spending habits, which is correct. D says the weightings attached to the basket of goods are revealed more often. This will increase accuracy, so I'll say C. Question 28, the government reduces the rate of direct income tax and devalues its currency. And which role describes the policy effects of these decisions? So reducing the rate of direct income tax is expansionary fiscal policy. So it has to be either B, C, or D, so A is not correct. And then devaluing your currency is under monetary policy. It has to be expansionary, so it's either C or D. And then this should be, when you reduce the rate of direct income tax and devaluing the currency, this one would be under expansionary fiscal policy, expansionary monetary policy, and then your supply side policy would also be expansionary. So because by reducing rate of direct income tax and devaluing the currency, you're actually allowing more capital goods to be purchased and so on and so forth. So it has to be D. Question 29, the balance of payments on the current account for Guatemala in 2011 was negative US 1.6 billion, and in 2016 was positive 1.0 billion. And what is most likely to have been a contributory factor to this change in the balance of payments on the current account over the 5-year period? A, it says an appreciation of the currency, which is not correct. B, it says a growth of household incomes, which is not correct. C, it says a lowering of tariffs on goods imported into Guatemala, which is not correct. D, it says productivity improvements in the export sector, which is correct. The reason why A is not correct is because if you appreciate the currency in real terms, this means that now it would be the money that you can see is actually much lower, the value itself, the real terms. B, a growth of household incomes will result in more expenditure, meaning that there's more outflow money. C, a lowering of tariffs, meaning that there will be more outflow money. D, productivity improvement in the export sector, meaning there's more there'll be more inflow. So answer is D. Question 30, the government wishes to increase aggregate demand, and which action would most likely to succeed? A, it says a reduction in income tax and increase in interest rates, which is not correct. B, it says a reduction in income tax and an increase in production subsidies, which is correct. C, it says an increase in corporate tax and an increase in government spending, which is not correct. D, an increase in value-added tax and a reduction in government spending, which is not correct. So answer has to be B. Alright, so this is the end of this paper. I hope you find this video helpful. Do share it out to people who may need this video. And I hope to see you again in the next video, which may be about another economics past year paper. Till then, this is qiphyedu.